We'll get started.
All right, we're good to go. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate you showing up for this demo and kind of walk through. Hopefully, everybody saw the little bit of a description on what we're going to be covering today. We won't make any assumptions as to what you've seen regarding Microsoft's offering around basically project portfolio and program management. So there's a lot going on in that space. And so we wanted to give you really a high level overview of the tools that are available and just kind of walk you through some of those areas to see what your level of interest is. And hopefully if you've got some questions, we're also going to stay to answer anything that you guys have around these tools. Everybody able to hear me okay and see the video? Any issues with that? Coming over? Yep, thumbs up. Yeah.
Hey, Leon, can I give folks a brief introduction to
Sure.
to the PMUG?
Yeah, you bet.
Great, thanks. Just to give my little spiel, on behalf of the Oregon Project Management Advisory Board, we wanted to just briefly welcome everyone to our Project Management User Group presentation for this month of March. My name is Anastasia Safranek, and I'm your coordinator for 2022, and will be assisting with facilitation today, and just a few housekeeping items before Leon gets started. First of all, be sure to mute your phone or PC if you're not speaking to help reduce any background noise. We encourage that if you are not speaking to also remain off camera. As you may have noticed in our previous recordings, that's what stays on the recording. If you have any questions, you are more than welcome to put them in the chat, and my colleague Alan Thompson will be monitoring that throughout our time together. You're also encouraged to stay on the line at the end of Leon's presentation to ask some questions to him directly about this content. This meeting will be recorded, and a link to this meeting and other meeting resources will be shared shortly after today's session and posted to our YouTube channel. You'll also find the slides in this Teams invite for today. You're welcome to share these with your colleagues and encouraged to continue to spread the word on PMUG Wednesday sessions that are forthcoming. And with that, we know that Teams is new for many people and old for others. Some of you may be just slightly interested in Microsoft Project, might love SharePoint, or be like me and use Planner tools and various other tools for your teams. Today, we are really happy to have Leon volunteer to share his insight with us. And with that, Leon, I'm going to hand the mic back to you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks for that introduction. Yeah, so we're just going to jump into some of the project tools, as Anastasia was mentioning, and also you might have a little bit of experience or a lot of experience with project. There's a lot going on there. They're continuously making updates because this is all in Microsoft 365. So if you have had some exposure to Teams, for example, you probably see that there's updates almost always being made. So here we're going to really focus on the Microsoft tools related to project management. Won't talk a lot about my background, but I'm one of the partners in a company called MS Project Pros. As the name implies, we focus primarily on implementing Microsoft Project, mostly in the enterprise space. So we do anywhere from relatively small implementations to global, multi-language, multi-currency type implementations of project. So for this particular presentation and walkthrough, we're really going to focus on three primary areas, get an overview of the landscape around Microsoft PPM, the different tools, what they're used for, and really some kind of use cases or usage scenarios for each of those different tools. We'll get a little bit deeper into this tools and services area so you get an idea. This is more on the technical side of what's going on behind the scenes, and to give you a little bit of background on that. And then we'll get into the demo so you can actually see the tool. And I'm just going to walk through some kind of day in the life of a project manager so that you can see what that looks like. So we'll start it off with just talking about the different tools that are out there. Planner was mentioned over here in the lower right-hand corner where I'm kind of rolling my point around, and right in the center is this roadmap. So I'll talk a little bit about each of these, and then we'll go in and take a look at them. So roadmap was really designed to allow for an organization to pull in very specific project information into this high level view. And so what you're seeing here in this little screenshot, if I just zoom in for just a moment, is you can see that there are very specific line items in here. And here's a particular owner, this Heather. And these are two projects that have been essentially pulled in from a specific environment, that being Project Online. What these other bars are representing, you can see Ira here has a couple different projects. These could be pulled in from Project for the Web or what's known as Azure DevOps. So Roadmap is designed to pull in very high level project information into this roadmap interface. Where we've been using this mostly is for planning projects. So if we were doing 2023 kind of forecasting projects, a lot of times you'll see that being pulled into this roadmap, kind of what's coming up. Now on the left-hand side, where the Project Online section is, this is really the heart of Microsoft's enterprise project management solution. This is where all of the projects are going to be stored. They're going to be essentially opened and saved and published, but not on the user's desktop. This is all going to be saved in a database that's available via the cloud in Project Online. And I'll show you guys a sample of that here in a moment. Now, what we use with Project Online is Project Professional, which is probably the tool that you're most used to, those of you who are using Project on the desktop. So Project is still a vital part of this overall solution. It's what's allowing you to manage the schedules. It's the schedule management part of the solution. Now, the other area that's relatively new is in this upper right-hand corner known as Project for the Web. This is comparable to what is out there that you probably see a lot of ads for, like Monday.com and Smartsheets. These are cloud-based, more work management solutions than full-fledged enterprise solutions. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we look at the actual demo, and you'll see what the differences are. So this is a great way to just get started with project management, this Project for the Web. It's kind of like lightweight project management. Now, what you can use along with that is Teams, of course, because Teams is now becoming really our centralized hub for everything that's going on, really, within Office and SharePoint, task activities, notifications. Obviously, we're using Teams here for meetings, we're recording it. All of that is happening within Teams, but we can integrate a lot of the project activity directly in Teams. So technically, you don't have to leave Teams in order to get access to vital project information. So everything is very well integrated. Planner is part of this overall solution. We like Planner because it is a little bit more open for guest access. So whenever there is a need to have non-employee resources getting access to project information, Planner can work very well. And Planner also has connectivity back to Project Online and specifically Project on the desktop. The last one that we won't go into in too much detail is known as Azure DevOps. And so this is more for managing agile type projects, software development. It's being mentioned here because you can bring in these DevOps boards into the roadmap. And so that's where that connectivity ties in. So we can see what's going on in the in the agile world. Well, we're pulling those projects into roadmap. Not to say that we can't manage agile projects in Project Online. Azure just tends to do a better job of it. Now, to go a little bit deeper, right? So this gives you the kind of high level, these are the different tools and how they work together, is what's going on behind the scenes. Don't have to worry too much about the technical details of what's going on here in this right-hand side. The significant part of this, as you can see here, if you look over to the right where it says Project for the Web and Roadmap, see how those arrows are pointing up and they point down to where the data is actually stored, where it's stored. And what's called the Common Data Service is what they've now are referring to as the Dataverse. So whenever you hear Dataverse, it's different than the metaverse, which is also floating out there. This is Microsoft's new cloud-based database, essentially, where you can build apps and store them in this centralized data location. So what this is telling us is the project for the web and roadmap data is actually stored over here in this data service area, while the project online data is stored in SharePoint, what are known as content databases, more of a traditional way of data storage. So it just kind of gives you a sense of what's going on behind the scenes, nothing that you would have to be too terribly concerned about as you interact with it, but it kind of gives you an idea about where everything is being stored. Now, moving on from that, some different usage scenarios for implementing all of these different tools typically fall into one of these three categories. The first one being just full-fledged enterprise project management. This is allowing you to roll out a tool like this across multiple departments, multiple regions, demographic regions, multiple users within those demographics, whether they're in Asia, Latin America, EMEA, the US, you would be able to have them all connecting to the same location. But it allows for the ability to trim what a user is seeing. So if I come in and I'm coming in from the US, I wouldn't see any of the Asian projects, for example. That's all the things that we can do with this solution in this first usage scenario, where you want each of the different departments across the organization to have their own unique set of templates, their own unique set of views, their own unique reports, and we're all able to roll it up into one centralized location and get that kind of broad visibility. It can also be used quite well with time tracking. So there is a timesheet component to the tool when you want to capture all time, not only project time, but also capturing non-project time. So as a tool that you might need to be able to account for resources, activities on projects and other work that they're doing, you might want to capture their rate and of course their calendar, their availability. We can do that here with the time tracking. And then lastly, it can be used very well with basically managing how the work is flowing through the organization from a demand and work management perspective. So it allows you to request a project, for example, and then have it routed based on certain criteria. For example, if it's less than 100 hours, well, then it may get routed to a project for the web project, and it's being managed by a lightweight project manager. Not to say that they're lightweight in terms of their capabilities, but the fact that it's less than 100 hours means that project for the web is a suitable tool for them. Now, if it's much more than that, let's say it's 400 plus hours and it requires, multiple resources from various departments, well, then that's going to get routed to Project Online, for example, and then get managed from that point forward. So it does a very good job of taking that request, compiling the necessary information regarding that request, and then routing it to the appropriate people to approve it, and then eventually get worked on. And there are other scenarios where it can just be simply used in a single department. So it wouldn't be considered a full-fledged enterprise tool, but maybe just IT is rolling it out and they're just going to use it for that particular department. Okay. All right, so that's it for the slides. Let's spend the rest of the time just working through some of these demos. So what I've done, like I mentioned, I want to kind of walk you guys through the different areas so you can see what what the differences are, but also what it would look like to a typical project manager as you work through it. So let me pull over this window, guys, here. All right, so this is 365, right? You've seen this before. When you log in, you get to your landing page. You go up to your waffle, of course, and you see all the various apps that you have available to you. There's Planner. And there's project, right? And this is technically project for the web. And you'll notice that there's other apps like Power BI. We didn't mention that. That's more of your reporting or your visualization dashboard tool that also works well with Project Online. So let's go to project first. I'll go ahead and click on that one. And you'll notice where it's taking me, project.microsoft.com. This is the landing page for Project for the Web. As I mentioned, this is equivalent to your Monday. It's probably the closest thing to think about how you would use this tool, because this is available to you anywhere, right? You log in and you're immediately able to start working on projects. So you'll notice that up at the very top, there's this new blank project. If I scroll down just a little bit, you'll see that there are very specific projects in this list. But you'll also notice that the source is slightly different. See the source here? It says roadmap, and then this one says PWA project, and then this one says project down here. What they're basically indicating is that this PWA project is a project online project. This project here is a project for the web project, but they're all in one centralized location that we can get easy access to. So if I wanted to create a new project, I was just going to, get started with something, I can just simply come up here and click new blank project. When I click the new blank project, it just immediately takes me in to start working on that project. Because this is web-based, what you're not going to see is a lot of saves, right? Like we would traditionally if we were to pull this down into an application. Instead, this is just continuously auto-saving. So notice that I clicked up in the untitled project, and I can just come in here and just give it a new project name, right? So we'll just call this construction project, something like that. Okay. It's allowing me to set a start date, and then there's some other data points that I can capture here. There's a calendar option. They're continuously making updates to Project for the Web. One thing that they added very recently is the ability to continue to add additional columns around your tasks, which can be quite useful. So we had a limitation as to the columns that we were able to work with. So what we can do is just simply start adding tasks in here. I'm going to gather requirements, something like that, tab it over. There's an assign to in here. I can just start plugging in a person's name. Of course, this is going to look at your 365 directory, find the particular resource, and it basically just adds them in there. Here it's saying, do I want to add them to this group? Because this is always looking at group membership, whether it's like Teams or here with Project for the Web. In this case, I'll tell it to just assign him to that task. Okay. And there's some other options in terms of putting duration estimates and the like. When I go to add the column, you'll see that there's multiple additional columns that I can add here. If I'm more comfortable with estimating something like effort, I would go ahead and plug effort in here as I work through this. The other thing that you're seeing is that I'm working with the grid type format. Those of you in Planner probably have seen this before. You say, hey, this looks a lot like Planner. I got grid, I've got a board, but the one thing I don't have in Planner is the timeline. Everybody likes the timeline, right? And so within Project for the Web, I get a timeline view that I don't get in Planner, right? That's one of the significant differences there. If I go back to the home, it basically is now just an available project. There's that construction project. I can do something like mark it as a favorite, and then it'll just pop up here to the top and we can start working on it. Directly within Teams, I can then add this project into Teams. So if I go back into Teams just briefly, right, I'll come in here into my Teams area. And you can see I have a lot of teams out here that I'm just testing with, but I'll just show you one of these. Let's maximize that screen. So if I'm here within Teams, let's get one that has a different channel here. And I would go to add, oops, not wiki, go to add. And as I search for apps, one of the apps I'm going to have is project. There it is, right? So I can add that project that I was just working with into, right, my teams area. And so now it's telling me all about the team management that I can work with. So how you initiate the team will be different. Obviously, you'd want to set up a process around this part of it. Usually you would route it through something like workflow so that you don't have project managers necessarily adding a lot of these different teams in here. Now, the other area, we'll go ahead and minimize that we want to spend a little bit more time on is Project Online. So notice that down at the bottom, there's a link to Project Online here. So I'll click on that. You notice it's launching what's called Project for the Web. So those PWA projects that we saw earlier were in reference to the projects that are being managed here in this environment. This is SharePoint. This is SharePoint Online. So if you remember that little illustration that we saw, basically it was saying that all the data was being stored in SharePoint, but on Project for the Web, it was being stored in that Dataverse area. So what I would do here as a project manager when I'm ready to create a project, I would come into projects, hit new, and then I'm able to create a project this way. So what obviously is different from Project for the Web is when I went to click on the project, it was just a blank project, right? It expected me to just start working on it. The difference is here, these are going to use templates, right? Templates that have already been somewhat built out to help the project manager as they're working through their project, right? So they don't have a blank project, but rather they have a project based on a particular type. Like in this case, notice it says Cloud EPT, and EPT is just the project type. So if I'm doing a cloud project, I'm going to choose this particular EPT because it has some very unique elements to it related to managing a cloud project, right? And what that looks like, I won't work through that because it takes a couple steps. Let's go look at one of these existing projects. First thing I'm going to do is just take this back to this view here. And what you can see is a long list of projects, right? These are all full-fledged, built-out projects that you're seeing in this list. So all of the project managers would be storing their projects in this location. So it gives us that project centralization. So we talk about what are the benefits of using Project Online is the fact that all projects are in one place. And I can easily get access to that information and view it in very specific ways. Maybe I want to see all these projects by the project manager. Well, I can change the view, and now I can organize all the projects based on the owner. And we can see how these are broken out. And I have a couple projects here. Okay. If I want to go drill down into a little bit more details of a particular project, let me just scroll down here. I know there's one I want to look at. Build out central. So I'll go ahead and select that project, getting into the details of it. And I can see now the details of the schedule itself. And the benefits of this Project Online environment is that the security behind this is very robust. In other words, who you want to get access to this project can be built on a hierarchy, an organizational hierarchy, not one where I am basically saying, I want to share this, right? So when we think about SharePoint, we always think, well, if I create something, I need to share it to very specific individuals. But Project Online can be more dynamic than that. It can be built where if you are in the same department as me, you immediately get access to the project that I've just created, for example. And you may get access to that project, but only read only, as opposed to read and write, and others can have it in read and write. So there's a lot of flexibility there around the way we can set these schedules up and who has access to them. So there's a few different components to each of these projects. We'll look at some of them. So we saw the schedule, right? And that's important to have that schedule detailed information because we can easily share that now to anybody who needs to get access to it. But what we also want to store around the project is going to be just really the data, right? Or the metadata around a particular project. So as I scroll down, you'll see what's being captured here. Of course, the owner, the start date. Notice that this is associated to a particular program, the state of the project, departmental information, and a number of just financial data points, budget estimate, cost to date, and you can see here the percent complete. So this is the metadata component of it. You can capture really as much field information as you need to around your projects. The other part of it, which is more on the portfolio side of it, is the strategic impact. So as you look at these items, you can see more strategic type statements, right? Access to new markets and distribution channels. The expectation here is the owner of this project is expected to rate, right, through these business drivers, what is the impact to that driver. And this is going to help us to prioritize this project. Now, this is all locked down because I'm not editing this, so it's not going to change it. But the PM would come in here and basically just check these off to give their best judgment on what impact each of these are going to have on that business driver. And then we can, right, analyze that behind the scenes and compare it to other project requests. The other thing that we have, because this is built on SharePoint, is a dedicated SharePoint site. And this is something that can be turned off or on based on if you were going to use it. So if you're not going to be storing documents here within SharePoint, you would turn this functionality off. And that's really what we're faced with today, because Teams is really everywhere. And so one of the choices organizations need to make is, where do they want to store their documents? Because when a team is created, there's also the opportunity to store information there. And so we don't want somebody, one project manager insisting that the documents related to the project get stored in Teams, but we also have this particular location as well to store relevant documents for that project. But what you're seeing here is that the tool allows you to, when the project is created, to have a dedicated site for just this project. So this is feeding all of the details coming from the project into this sub-site, right? So this is below the site that we were just currently in. And in here, what we can track are things like issues and risks and deliverables. So you can see there's a number of issues that are in this particular project. These issues can also be tied back to the task. So we can make a connection between the two. And visually, you would see it while you're looking at that previous view being the project center. You would be able to say, oh, hey, there's an actual issue related to a project and it's related to this task. So that connectivity works really well there. Go back to home. The other thing we can do here is store the documents. So you get a document library, and these documents can also be tied back to the tasks. And as you're seeing here, this particular document library already contains a number of project management documents that can be baked into the template. So when the project manager creates the projects and publishes it, when they come into their site, they would already have these documents ready to go, ready to be filled out and managed in here. So there's quite a few benefits to doing that. And you can also do that in Teams. The only thing you don't get in Teams is that connectivity. That's what you wouldn't be lacking. So we can create a dedicated team per project, but this connectivity between the documents and the tasks would be lost, right? But sometimes that's okay if we just simply don't feel we need that. All right, now I'm going to go just navigate back up to the top here and go to the projects. And that's going to take me just simply back into the project center. Now, these projects are also able to be managed in project on the desktop. So as I pull that up here, right, here's project. It's already launched. And so project on the desktop is really designed for all the heavy lifting of your project schedules, right? This is what your typical project manager end user is going to want to be able to work with as it relates to their projects, right? Not all of them, but all of the, heavy project users will appreciate the fact that they can still leverage everything that they've learned about project while you're working in Project Online. So you can see that same project here, Build Out Central, that I'm able to just simply open within project. And notice the difference. I'm opening enterprise projects. So there's a connectivity between the desktop client, right, and Project Online in order for me to open up these projects. So I'll go ahead and just open that guy up there. You'll notice that there's a checkout. So these projects are stored in the cloud, right? So there's a check-in, checkout mechanism as you work with your schedules. So that means that I can actually open up a schedule like this and read only while somebody else is working on it, okay? But only one person can have it checked out at any given time. So we're seeing a lot of that kind of multi-collaborative functionality in Teams. We don't have that here. And I don't think we'd really want it. We don't want, a bunch of different people working on our schedules at the same time. Not to say that we can't send tasks to them. That's different. This is basically working directly in the schedule itself. So this forces us to check a project out when we want to edit it and work on it. Okay. So a couple things we can do here within these given projects. Let me get out of this or just move this up a little bit for now. You're seeing a lot of just what you would typically work with in a project, right? All of the, won't go into details on what project is able to do, but if you've worked with project before, there's no, this isn't a light version of project. This is full-fledged Project Pro. What you will notice as I scroll down here, as we start to move into talking a little bit about Planner, is I mentioned that there's an integration between Planner and Project, and we're seeing that here. You see the little icon there, right? And so essentially what happened is that this task was associated to a Planner plan. And so this is where the integration comes in. So often, and this is the way we typically will present this, is this task is 2 weeks long, right? The project manager isn't going to manage all the details within those 2 weeks. They just know that this design document approval is going to be managed down in Planner. So we decide to link to Planner. By linking to Planner, right? And here it is, here's the linked plan. I'll go ahead and click on that. It's going to allow me to then use Planner for all of those details that are being represented, right? And that just gave me a pop-up. And now I'm in the Planner Hub and I'm looking at that linked plan. So the beauty of working in here, as I mentioned, is that this can be shared. And you can see I have an example of that. This MPP subcontractor, we were just running through some tests because I wanted to see how it looks on an older Android tablet, because we have, a lot of people out in the field and, they have various devices. And so this is a user basically with a Hotmail account on an Android device that would get this task, right? And they would know, where it's coming from and everything else. So that's where this integration comes in between Planner and Project. Now, all of these details will not roll up into Project. It's just a connection. So if there are, 60 hours that have been compiled in this Planner plan, Microsoft Project on the desktop isn't aware of that, right? It doesn't know about it, so to speak. Okay. All right, back to Project. So there's your integration between Planner and Project, and all of these projects as they come in can be then reported on. So we have a couple reports here, and this is where Power BI will then play a role. And hopefully this will play nice. I didn't click on this before to make sure something's happening there. That's a good sign. So this is a Power BI dashboard. Power BI is Microsoft's visualization tool. It has been just basically embedded in this page. And this is aggregating and pulling all that project information that we were just looking at in Project Online. So Power BI is your visualization tool for essentially any reporting that relates to project. And you can see there's I don't know how many of these we have in here. So I can go in here and look at my project owner, for example. If I can grab this guy, let's see how many projects Ed is working on, and you can see how it dynamically changes it there. And I'll uncheck him. Maybe I want to see all the forecast projects. So I'll click on that one, scroll down, and you can see how it just filters it down. So these are all my forecast projects. Now let's see how many cloud projects we have. Click on that one, and it's telling us if I just roll it over, it's 7%, a little over 7% are cloud EPT, and all these ones are just simply quick start. So Power BI being your reporting or your dashboard tool. Now, lastly, we have just a couple minutes left. I'm going to jump back to really the homepage here and show you the other part of where SharePoint can come into play. So this is the basically a site that is dedicated to really support your Project Online implementation. I'm just simply calling this PMO. So you can use SharePoint and leverage SharePoint for managing all of your PMO activities. You recall I mentioned the ability to have a request list or request log. Well, we're seeing that here where I have this project idea request, which is leveraging SharePoint. So if I wanted to suggest a new project, I would do it through here by just selecting new item, and then it would take me to the list and I could fill out that relevant information. The other thing you can manage from here would be things like change requests. We see quite a bit of this as well, where I want to make a change request for a particular project that I'm working on. And so again, I can come in here and hit new and then choose the, I don't have it configured here, but what we would typically do would be to pull the project in to this list so that we could identify which project we're actually making a change to. Then, of course, we could do other things like store, in this case, we have a training library. Looks like there's just a single document in there. Here's a PMO library that stores all of those templates that you might find useful for managing your projects. So this works really well with SharePoint. It's really designed for all of that document management. And then I'll head back up to the quick start, and we're right at 5:40. So Anastasia, do we want to open it up to questions or?
Yeah, I think now would be a really great time for questions. So I encourage people to raise their hand if they have a question that they, like to ask out loud, or feel free to put it in the chat. I know one that I was thinking about is whether or not, can you tell me, does it matter if you're establishing a new project? Does it matter whether or not it's what is it, PWA, project for or does it matter if it's a regular project, if you'd like to add the ability for your subject matter experts to access or contribute or make updates and tasks? I know in the standard sort of Microsoft project, it's really like you mentioned before, you kind of want to keep that contained, and you don't want a lot of people obviously to contribute to sort of that main project plan. But I'm wondering if it requires a license or just a team membership, if you could kind of talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, and that's the last, if I was going to extend this, that definitely where I would go to regarding the task management. So that's right in alignment with that. So you can think of this as a role-based tool as well, so that users basically get slotted into a particular role. So a team member is different than a project manager. So if I'm, as a team member, going to basically get assignments, I'm expected to work on tasks within a project, and then report up for approval by the project manager. So that team member, when they come in, they would see a completely trimmed down version of this. So there's security trimming that's involved. So as a team member, I have the least amount of rights. But what I can do is I can see all my tasks, of course, and I can see the project details for any project that I'm on. So that's where this task comes into play. So when I come to the tasks area as a team member, there are definitely some things that I can do to contribute to the project. So when I meant that the project wouldn't be worked on simultaneously, meaning that the schedule, there would not be users editing it simultaneously, but the team members can come in here and do things like add a new task, right? But it's based on the approval by the project manager. So the project manager must approve that new entry by the team member. They could set up rules to automate that, but typically they're going to want to review that task update that's being made by the team member, and then upon acceptance, it will then go directly into the schedule, right? So there is certainly some of that. And they can even do things like reassign the tasks. They can basically suggest that they get removed from the task. So there's a lot of back and forth that can happen between the team member and the project manager as you assign them to tasks. So that's definitely built in there. The other thing you can do on top of that, since we're talking about roles, is you can have a user in a team lead role where as a team lead, they don't necessarily need Microsoft Project on the desktop, but what you do is you give them the permissions to actually go in the browser. For example, this is Ed's project. I'm just going to, hopefully he gave me permissions to it. I'm going to drop in there. But let's say I was the team lead and I didn't have project on the desktop. I could still come in here and edit this project in the browser and make updates into the schedule itself, right? So now I can come in and you notice that this ribbon now has all of these items available for me to insert tasks, delete tasks. And there's not an approval here because I'm a team lead, right? The project manager has designated me as a team lead, maybe has placed a holder task out there and has asked me to go and build it out. And that happens quite often. So we now have a project manager, a team lead, and a team member. We have those three unique roles that we can set up, right? Is that helpful for that regarding the task management?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate
Okay.
knowing those roles.
Yeah, sure.
Team Lauren of DOJ has a question.
Yeah.
Hi, yes. The strategic impacts where the project manager can rate, the projects and so forth, can those be customized or they just come canned and they stay that way?
No, very much customized. So that is managed in this, what's called the driver library. So you'll see these are the drivers that we were looking at in that strategic area right in here. So you can have as many of these that you want, and they can also be departmentally based, which is very powerful, right? So you could have a whole set of drivers for one department that are completely different than another. And so as a user, if I'm in that department, I would only see those drivers is basically
Great.
how that's good. Yeah, how that's going to
Awesome.
work. And then what happens with these guys is then they go into the prioritization where then as a portfolio manager, you can then start to use those drivers to say, well, what's more important than what? Right. So as I come into this prioritization area, I can then make that comparison and it will spit out the priority for me. Right. So we can see that for this particular prioritization, access to new markets has a higher priority. So now we'll take in all of those projects and say, okay, which ones actually had this as kind of their highest priority? Well, that's the project that we'll push through because we prioritize that higher.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Any other questions?
There are no other questions in the chat.
Okay. Did we want to look at a few more things? Is there a topic in this that we could deep dive in?
one of the comments in the chat that wasn't, it was more rhetorical, said the PERS is still using the thick client and PWA, as Anastasia said, impacted by MS365 licensing and deployment. And I'm not sure if there's anything that can relate to that at all. To that, is that something that? Oh, wait, here we go. We do have another question. I'm sorry, I was focusing on that, but one just popped in. Does the Power BI dashboard come as a template, or do you need to know how to build that out from scratch?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'll circle back to the licensing because there was a licensing slide that I had in there, but we removed it because we didn't want to bog you guys down by the licensing, but it might help with understanding how the users basically get access into the system. So that would be something to think about. So I'll circle back to that. Regarding the Power BI templates, the nice thing that Microsoft has done for us is they have given us some very robust templates as starting points, and I'm firing up Power BI to show you that here. So there is a downloadable set of templates that you can essentially, just as long as you know the address to the PWA site, you could connect Power BI to that location. So here's Power BI on the desktop. Look at this. I don't want to open up that first report. I'll open up one of these other ones. Oops. Get into. Okay, here's a good one here. And this, what I'm pulling up right now, it's on my other screen. I'll show you the reports that come out of the box. So if you just simply search for, and I can email you the direct link, but if you search for Project Online Power BI reports, excuse me, literally that, it'll come up. And it's a downloadable file, and if you, from a PBI perspective, it's a PBIT. It's a Power BI template. When you save the Power BI files, they're PBIX files. So what they're basically giving you is a template that has these multiple reports that then you can connect your data into. And so these are all the ones that they give us right here. Try to maximize that. Now, this won't show all of your, like, any customization that you've created, particularly around fields, will not be in here. But see these tabs down at the bottom: portfolio dashboard, timeline, portfolio costs. I'm just clicking on these tabs down at the bottom. They give you all this. So we did not build these reports. These are just out of the box reports that are connecting to existing project data points, right? Like baseline cost, all these EAC earned values, they're all coming from project. These are fields that are already contained, and there's a lot of them. Resource availability, resource details. There's a nice little heat map here. And if I keep going across, there's a project status, which allows me, notice I'm even looking at the build out central. So this is all of the reporting that gets done here. So essentially what happens with Power BI, to just go into a little bit on that, is this is on the desktop, right? And so on the desktop is where I'm doing the development of it. Now let me just pull this over for a moment so you can see something else. Because let me just pull it from this tab over here. If I go up to the little waffle and I go down to Power BI here, I'm in the browser, right? I'm in the web-based interface of Power BI. This is what they would refer to as the Power BI service. This is what you're paying for. So in order for you to have the Power BI service, you've got to pay Microsoft $10 a month, right? That is what they call Power BI Pro. When you have that service, what it will allow you to do will be to take these reports that you're looking at here and publish them. See that little publish in the upper right hand corner? So Power BI on the desktop is free. Anybody can download it and can start building these reports. But how do I share them? How do I expose this data to somebody that's out in 365? Of course, I can just send these to PDF and I'm done, or just, even there's a PowerPoint component where I can just drop this in there, and that works wonderfully. But if I want to leverage the service, I have to pay for that service. So when I publish this, what I'm doing is I'm publishing this back to these dashboards. I'm publishing them into this workspace, or these workspaces, because there's multiple ones that I can work with, right? We'll find one of these in here. There's that QS for quick start. So this happens to be a quick start workspace where these dashboards that we're just looking at get published into. Okay, so that's the whole Power BI desktop to the service connectivity that's going on there. So I publish back to here. Once it's published in here, you can see that these are taking slightly different icons, right? This is the report. This is the data source. Then here's another report, and here's its data source. So here within Power BI is where I tell it who has access to it. I also tell it how often I want it to refresh, right? Any kind of troubleshooting that I'm doing with the data source, I'm going to do out of here. While I interact with the dashboard, it's going to be this way. So if other users also have a Power BI Pro license, they would be able to go into their waffle, click on that workspace, and see this report. Okay. But you remember what I showed you earlier? I showed you this report that was baked right into the page. Well, the way that was done, if we click on File, is we can embed these reports. And even look at these, right? We can publish these. Now they won't be, this is going to pull in static data, right? These aren't going to be refreshed automatically, but these work quite well, right? So we can publish these out as a report, and then just update them when you need to, whenever you need to have it out there. But if you embed it, it's going to be real time. Every time it refreshes, when the user goes out and looks at that page, it's the latest and greatest data. And usually these refresh nightly, right? Every 24 hours. You typically don't do it too much more frequent than that. Okay, so hopefully that was good with the Power BI part of it. Let me pull up that slide that I had hidden related to the licensing, just to give you a sense of what's going on there. Let's unhide it. So when you think about licensing and the cost component to it, Project for the Web is what they call P1. So P1, this is their new, right, Monday killer. And P1 is included if you get P3 or P5, so you also get the P1 license. So P1 gives you that first part that we looked at where you clicked on project and you're able to do, web-based project management. Then you move into Project Online. So there's definitely a very distinctive line that's being drawn between Project for the Web and Project Online. Even though you can pull these in together, they're distinctively different, right? P3, this $30 a user license, this includes Microsoft Project Professional. So the way you can think of how the licensing has changed is that traditionally, right, remember how we used to buy software, we would just simply go out and purchase it, and Project for the longest time was about $900. So you would buy it and you'd be running Project Professional 2013 until you upgraded to 2016, and then you'd pay another $900. Instead, Microsoft would rather that you pay them $30 every month, and they'll give you access to being able to download and run Microsoft Project. So Project on the desktop has become a $30 a month per user license. So this is only for users that are going to be running Microsoft Project Pro. But this P3 plan, once you turn this on, this gives you Project Online. So there is not a specific Project Online license. As soon as a single user has P3, you then get Project Online. That service is now turned on and available to you. Okay. Now there is a P5 here, and I don't like the way Microsoft has basically presented this plan because we have a lot of customers that are signing up for this when they really don't need it. So if you talk to Microsoft, they'll tell you, well, P5 gives you some additional portfolio and resource management capabilities, but it's all a lot of smoke and mirrors, to be honest with you, because you largely get the same functionality with P3. So these advanced capabilities that you get here in P5 are really not worth the $20, to be honest. One of the options is the ability to print out some of the resource views that you don't get in P3. You still get some of the portfolio capabilities that P5 is supposed to be basically giving you. And so when it comes to P5, you'll grow into it. You don't need it right away. Okay, if you're not going to do anything with the portfolio piece out of the gate, do not bother getting the P5 license, and you can upgrade to it very easily. Okay, so just think the P3, and what you have down here is called PWA Essentials, which is a $7 license. This is an end user license. This license would be used by the team member, would be used by the team lead, would be used by a resource manager, even a portfolio viewer would only need this $7 Essentials license. So you can get up and running pretty quickly and pretty cost effectively with just the P3, which would only be required for your project managers, right? The ones that are running Project Pro doing the heavy lifting, and all of the other users would just need Essentials. But you need at least Essentials to connect to PWA or Project Online. Otherwise, it won't let you go in. And you get this P1 as part of your P3. So that's kind of nice, right? So there's not, one of the big mistakes is we have a lot of customers saying, well, I got P5 because that is Project Online. And actually, that's what I thought for when they first started rolling these out. That's what I thought the plan was, until, of course, learning that this is designed to be more of an advanced plan here. But under further kind of scrutiny, we realize that there's not a lot that you're getting for that extra $20+. Okay, is that helpful? Any follow-ups to the licensing? Okay, very good.
I think, again, because we have a variety of state and local agencies joining the call today, it probably very much depends on what the user agreements are that your IS services might have with Microsoft or elsewhere.
Yeah, sure.
Alan, do we have any more questions before rounding out today's session?
No, you do have a comment for everyone. If any of the audience has any speaker suggestions or topics, please take a moment to share. And there's a SurveyMonkey link.
Yeah, very good. And Anastasia, I think we thought about adding some additional sessions for you guys later on. So hopefully we'll see you down the road with another topic. Be more than happy to do it again.
I really appreciate that. We're really glad that everybody could attend today, and hope that you all gained a greater understanding of how Microsoft Project Portfolio tools are set up. I really like the feature, especially and something I know I'm taking away is thinking about tying and ranking strategic initiatives with different things within a portfolio. And I want to say a huge thank you to Leon Gallegos, and thank you all again for attending. Please find some additional resources in the chat, and we look forward to a follow-up email after this session. We'll have additional links, a short survey that will help us improve future PMUG experiences, and an opportunity for you all to share what you'd like to see in the future. Right now, our next event is scheduled for May, but we may have something sooner. And again, you're welcome to nominate yourself if there's a subject matter expertise that you would like to share. Or something, and you're welcome also to encourage your colleagues to join our PMUG listserv as well. Enjoy the rest of your week. Don't forget to get vaccinated and boosted if you haven't already, and we'll see you again in May. And with that, I am stopping the recording.